I woke up to the unmistakable sound of the shower running in the bathroom. The apartment felt too quiet, too still, as if something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. It had been 3 days since we'd broken up, and I still hadn't figured out how it had all spiraled out of control so quickly. Everything was supposed to be straightforward. He was supposed to pack his things, leave, and we'd both move on. That's how it's supposed to work, right? But there he was, the man I had just called my ex, in my bathroom, taking a shower as if nothing had changed. I stood frozen at the foot of the bed, staring at the bathroom door, the water running louder than my thoughts. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to just pretend I hadn't heard anything, to go back to sleep and deal with it later, but I couldn't.
There was a weight on my chest that wouldn't let me rest.
I had to confront it now. No more pretending. I threw off the covers, the cold air hitting my skin as I marched to the bathroom door. My hand hovered over the doorknob for a moment. The urge to just yank the door open and confront him was overwhelming. But I took a deep breath, reminded myself that I wasn't the one who had done something wrong here.
He was.
I knocked. Hey, what are you doing? There was a long pause before I heard his voice, muffled by the sound of the running water. Showering. I blinked, not sure if I had heard him right. You're showering? In my bathroom? Well, yeah, he replied, his voice annoyingly calm. It's still our bathroom, right? I mean, until I move out, I think it's fine. I felt my heart start to race.
No.
No, it's not fine. We're done. You need to leave.
Now.
I could hear the soap scraping against the skin, a small, irritating sound that made my blood boil. Look, can we just talk about this? You don't need to be all dramatic. Dramatic? Are you kidding me? I slammed my fist against the door, the force of it making me wince. This is my apartment, my bathroom, and you're acting like you have every right to be here. I don't think it's that big of a deal, he said nonchalantly, still not sounding like someone who realized he had just crossed a line. We can figure this out. You don't need to be so hostile. Hostile? You're the one who's refusing to leave. You're living in my apartment without paying rent and acting like I'm the one being unreasonable. I heard him sigh from the other side of the door, followed by a soft shuffle of his feet on the tiles. Then, after a moment of silence, he said, I'm not going anywhere, all right? I've still got stuff here, and I don't have anywhere else to go. I told you, I'll leave when I'm ready. I just need some time. It was like a punch to the stomach. He was so calm, so sure of himself, as if my feelings didn't matter at all. I could already feel the old tension creeping back between us, the power struggle, the manipulation that had always been there, lurking beneath the surface. You don't get to make those decisions anymore, I shouted, leaning my forehead against the door. You don't live here anymore. You can't live here anymore. For a brief moment, I could hear him moving around in the bathroom, the water running again, like he was just going about his day, as if I didn't matter. As if my words didn't matter. Then he spoke again, his voice a little softer, but still annoyingly dismissive. Look, I don't want to make this harder than it needs to be. I'm not trying to cause problems. But I'm not leaving until I'm ready. You can't rush me. It's not like I'm freeloading. I'm not asking for anything. That was it. That was the moment I realized that this wasn't just some misunderstanding. It wasn't some phase where he'd snap out of it and realize that he needed to go. This was him planting his flag, claiming territory, and daring me to do something about it. I don't care what you think, I said, my voice trembling with anger. You can't stay here. You can't just stay in my apartment and do whatever you want. If you're not going to leave, then you need to start paying rent. There was a long silence after that. I could hear him in the bathroom, shifting around, the sound of the water stopping suddenly. I held my breath, waiting for his response. Was he going to yell at me? Was he going to laugh it off? Or was he going to actually leave like I had asked? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke again, and when he did, his voice sounded more serious, more calculated.
No.
I'm not paying. If you want me out, then you have to make me leave. But I'm not paying rent. I blinked, the words hitting me like a slap to the face. This wasn't just a refusal to leave anymore. This was a declaration. a challenge. He wasn't leaving, not unless I forced him to. And if I wanted him gone, I'd have to fight for it. You're crazy, I whispered, though I knew it wasn't just a crazy thing to do. It was a deliberate choice. A power play. And I didn't know how to handle it. I had never felt so trapped in my own life, in my own home. And just like that, it became clear, this was no longer just a breakup. This was war. The days blurred together in a haze of frustration and confusion. At first, I tried to go about my life as if nothing had changed, like it was just a small inconvenience. But every morning when I woke up, I would see him sitting in the kitchen, sipping his coffee like it was the most natural thing in the world. The smell of his shampoo still lingered in the bathroom, and sometimes I would find his socks under the couch or a half-empty bottle of beer in the fridge. The apartment, which had once been my sanctuary, had turned into a battlefield. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just about him not leaving. Something deeper was at play. Something he wasn't telling me. It started to sink in that I was losing control, and that terrified me. The more I tried to enforce boundaries, the more he pushed back, and each time, it felt like I was losing a piece of myself. I didn't want to let him win, but I wasn't sure how to fight back. When I'd approach him about leaving, he'd shrug it off, claiming he was working on finding a place but needed more time. It always felt like an excuse. He wasn't in any rush to go anywhere. One evening, as I came home from work, I found him sprawled out on the couch, a plate of food in his lap, watching some reality TV show I couldn't even remember the name of. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just staring at him, watching him act as if nothing had changed. He didn't even notice me at first. It was like he had just moved in and was acting like a tenant who had been here for years, not the man who had once been my partner. "Are you kidding me?" I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. He looked up slowly, a lazy smile spreading across his face. "What's up? You're still here," I said, feeling the words leave my mouth like an accusation. "I told you this wasn't okay. You can't just live here freeloading like nothing's changed." He put his plate down on the coffee table, his expression turning defensive. "I told you. I'm figuring things out. I'm not exactly in a position to just up and leave. I'm not going anywhere until I'm ready." "You're never going to be ready," I shot back, the frustration in my chest rising. "I can't keep living like this. This isn't normal. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm just staying here until I have a place to go. I'm not freeloading. I'm just in transition," he said, his voice strangely calm, like he was trying to talk me down from something. Transition, I repeated, incredulous. "You're not in transition. You're holding me hostage in my own apartment. You've been here for weeks, and you're not even trying to find a place anymore. You've got no intention of leaving." He didn't flinch at my words. Instead, he leaned back in the couch, his eyes never leaving mine. "You're just overreacting. It's not like I'm causing any problems." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I couldn't let him see me unravel. He was always good at pushing my buttons, making me feel like I was the crazy one when I was just trying to stand my ground. He had that effect on me, and I hated it. "I can't believe this," I muttered, walking away from him and heading to my bedroom. My mind raced as I slammed the door behind me. What was I supposed to do now? Call the police? That seemed extreme, but was I really supposed to just let him stay here indefinitely? I felt trapped. The next few days were no better. It wasn't just the apartment that felt suffocating, it was everything. I had tried to reach out to friends, tried to make plans, but it was hard to focus when I knew he was in the next room, claiming that he didn't need to leave. It wasn't just the physical presence of him, it was the constant tension, the way he slowly wore me down every time I tried to confront him. One evening, I came home to find him sitting at the kitchen table with a laptop open. I had just come from an interview for a new job, and I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but when I saw him there, still so casually occupying my space, it pushed me to the edge. "You need to leave," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm not going to let this go anymore. You're taking advantage of me, and I'm done." He didn't look up from the screen. "You're really upset over this, aren't you?" I clenched my fists, trying to control the rage that was bubbling up. You've been here for almost a month, taking advantage of me, of this place. You don't even care how I feel about it. Of course I care, he said without looking at me. But you're acting like I'm some kind of villain. I'm just trying to figure my life out, and you're making it harder than it needs to be. I don't have a place to go, okay? I'm not ready to leave. It's that simple. I stared at him, my chest tight with frustration. You're just waiting for me to give up, aren't you? You think if you keep acting like this, I'll get tired of fighting and just let you stay here forever. He finally looked up at me, and the expression on his face was colder than I had ever seen. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am just waiting for you to give up. Because at the end of the day, this is my decision, not yours. I'm not leaving unless I want to. I froze. The words stung, but it was the look in his eyes that hit hardest. There was something calculating behind them, a coldness I hadn't seen before. It wasn't just about him not leaving anymore. It was about him testing me, seeing how far I would go before I cracked. And at that moment, I realized that this wasn't going to end easily. There was no simple solution. I had to find a way to outsmart him, but that meant figuring out what he was really after, what was truly driving this behavior. But as the days passed, it became clear that I wasn't dealing with just an ex who refused to leave. I was dealing with someone who wanted to break me down piece by piece until I had no choice but to give up. I wasn't ready to lose, not yet. But I also knew that the longer this dragged on, the harder it would be to get him out. And so, the game continued. Each move we made bringing us closer to something darker, something more dangerous than either of us could have anticipated. It wasn't until I was standing at the edge of a total breakdown that I realized how badly I had miscalculated everything. I'd tried everything I could think of, making demands, offering compromises, being calm, being angry, but none of it worked. He wasn't leaving. No matter what I did, no matter how I begged or shouted or threatened, he had no intention of leaving. It wasn't just the apartment he was holding on to. It was the control he had over me, over the space that was supposed to be mine. I was living in a war zone, and I didn't even know where the front lines were anymore. The breaking point came one night when I was coming home late from work. I'd gotten the job I'd been interviewing for, but it wasn't a victory I could celebrate, not when he was still here. When I stepped through the door, I felt the familiar weight in my chest as I saw him sprawled out on the couch, a beer in hand, watching the same mindless TV shows. The apartment was dark, save for the dim glow of the television. It hit me like a wave. This wasn't just about him not leaving. This was about him taking pieces of my life, piece by piece, until nothing was left but the remnants of what used to be. I stood there for a moment, staring at him. I didn't even know how to talk to him anymore. I didn't know if I should be calm or scream. He was so completely unaffected by my presence, as if he had every right to be there. That cold realization made me feel small, like I was the one in the wrong. "Hey," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, unsure of what I wanted from him anymore. He glanced at me, his expression blank. "Hey," he said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "What are you doing?" I asked, finally managing to push the words out. "I'm just watching TV," he said, not even bothering to look at me fully. "You look stressed. What's up?" I closed the door behind me, standing just a few feet away from him. The distance between us felt insurmountable. "I'm tired of this," I said, the frustration pouring out of me now. "You're not leaving. You're not paying rent. You're just sitting here and living off me, and I can't take it anymore." He sighed, finally sitting up on the couch, the nonchalance in his posture infuriating me. "I told you I'm not paying rent. I'm not leaving until I'm ready. You're going to have to deal with that, all right?" I could feel the walls around me closing in, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Why?" I managed to choke out. "Why are you doing this? Why won't you just go?" He leaned back, crossing his arms, his face hardening. "Why should I leave? You're not kicking me out and you're not doing anything about it. It's that simple. I'm not going anywhere." I could feel my hands trembling at my sides. I had nothing left to say to him. It wasn't just the apartment he was taking from me. It was everything. My sense of control, my peace of mind, my future. I was starting to feel like I was losing myself, like I was shrinking with every passing day he stayed. And then, just as I was about to turn and walk away, something in me snapped. I had reached the point where I couldn't handle it anymore, and I was done pretending like this was all just a misunderstanding or something I could solve with a simple conversation. I needed help, and I wasn't going to wait for him to get the message. I needed to find a way out, and I needed to do it now. The next day, I called my friend Rachel. She'd always been a rock for me. Someone who'd seen me through all the ups and downs of my life. Someone who understood when I wasn't even sure what I was going through. I needed someone to listen, and Rachel had always been good at listening without judgment. When she picked up the phone, I didn't even give her a chance to greet me. "Rachel, I need you to help me," I blurted out, my voice on the verge of cracking. "I don't know what to do. He won't leave, and I can't take it anymore." Rachel's voice was calm, but I could hear the concern behind her words. "Hey, slow down. What's going on? Who's not leaving?" I didn't even know where to start, but I tried anyway. "It's my ex. We broke up, and he's still living in my apartment. He won't leave. He won't pay rent, and I'm losing my mind. I don't know what to do." There was a brief silence on the other end, and then Rachel's voice came back, steady and practical. "Okay, you need to do something. This isn't just about him refusing to leave. This is about him taking control. You're not going to be able to just talk your way out of it. If you want him gone, you have to take charge. You can't keep letting him stay." I knew she was right, but I couldn't stop the rush of panic that hit me in that moment. I don't know how to do that. I've tried everything. He just shuts me down, and every time I try to fight back, it feels like I'm losing. Rachel sighed. "You can't keep doing it on your own. I'm coming over tomorrow. We'll figure it out." I didn't even know what she could do that I hadn't already tried, but having her there made me feel like there was some hope. It wasn't much, but it was something I needed. The next day, Rachel showed up at my door, her presence almost a physical relief. I led her to the living room, and we sat on the couch, neither of us saying much for a while. I could feel her looking around the apartment, her eyes scanning the space like she was evaluating the situation. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but sharp. "I'm not saying this to make you feel worse, but you've let him have control of everything in here. The apartment, the schedule, your emotions. You need to take it back. And you're not going to do it by being polite or waiting for him to leave. He's not going anywhere unless you force him to." I nodded, her words sinking in. I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd given up in this. How much power I had handed over to him without even realizing it. "We need a plan," Rachel said. "We're not just going to sit here and hope he leaves. You've got to be strategic about this." We spent the next hour talking through different ideas, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was gaining some ground. Rachel's perspective was exactly what I needed. She wasn't emotionally involved in the situation the way I was, so she could think clearly, and she was determined to help me win back what was mine. By the end of the conversation, I had a plan. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was something. It was a start, and that was enough to give me the strength to face the next phase of this battle. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I was going to take my life back. But even as I prepared to put the plan into motion, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this situation than I realized. What exactly was he after? Why was he so determined to stay? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew I was about to find out. The plan wasn't perfect. I knew that. But as soon as Rachel left the apartment, I felt the weight of it settle in. For the first time in a long while, I had a sense of direction, of purpose. I wasn't just reacting to him anymore. I was taking action. But as I sat there, the house eerily quiet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. I had no idea how far he was willing to go to stay, or if he was even aware that this battle wasn't about the apartment anymore. It was about power, control, and who would be the one to walk away in the end. The next morning, I woke up early, feeling like I was already running behind on something I couldn't even fully grasp. I knew I had to approach this situation with a calm that I didn't feel, with a steady hand that wasn't anywhere near ready. As I dressed for work, I could hear him moving around in the living room. The constant presence of him, the way his every move punctuated the space, grated on me more than I cared to admit. I didn't want him there, but more than that, I didn't want to feel like I was being held hostage in my own life. I walked into the living room and found him sitting on the couch, a cup of coffee in hand, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as I entered, his gaze unfazed, like nothing had changed, like we were still those two people who used to make breakfast together every morning. "Morning," he said, his tone casual, too casual. "Morning," I replied stiffly, crossing my arms over my chest. I knew I had to stick to the plan. I couldn't let him throw me off balance. "I'm going to need you to leave," I said, my voice clear and steady, even though I could feel my hands shaking at my sides. "You're not paying rent. You're not contributing. And this is no longer working for me." He set his coffee down on the table with a soft clink, his gaze never leaving mine. "I've already told you. I'm not going anywhere until I have a place to go. I'm working on it. You're just going to have to be patient." "I'm done being patient," I snapped, the frustration building in my chest. "You're taking advantage of me. This is my apartment and I want you out. I've given you more than enough time to figure this out. Now, I'm not asking anymore. I'm telling you, you need to leave today." He sat there for a moment, eyes narrowed. "You think you can just kick me out like that? You think you can just dictate what happens here? I don't think you understand who has the power in this situation." I froze. His words hit me like a slap in the face. The power? I hadn't even realized it until that moment, but he was right. He had been making the rules, not me. This was his way of reminding me who was still in control. My heart pounded in my chest as I took a step forward, the weight of everything hanging between us. "You don't have power here," I said, more forcefully than I expected.
Ida.
"And I'm done letting you walk all over me." His lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You really think you're in control? You've been letting me stay here for weeks. You've been the one bending. It's cute that you think you've been in control this whole time." I felt my stomach turn as the truth settled over me like a cold wave. He wasn't just being difficult, he was gaslighting me, making me doubt my own reality. All this time, I'd been questioning myself, wondering if I was overreacting, if I was being unfair. But now I knew the truth. He was playing me, manipulating me into thinking I had no right to ask him to leave. The realization hit harder than anything else had before. "You need to leave now," I said again, the words coming out with more conviction. I had to stick to my guns. I wasn't going to let him twist this anymore. He stood up slowly, his face hardening as he looked at me. "You're making a huge mistake. You can't do this. You think you're so clever, but you have no idea what you're really up against." Before I could respond, there was a knock on the door. Both of us froze. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the interruption was unsettling. I glanced at him, but he didn't say a word. My heart was racing. Who could that be? I walked toward the door cautiously and opened it, only to be greeted by a man in a suit. His face was unfamiliar, but something about him struck me as urgent. I felt a chill run through me as he flashed a badge. "Are you the resident of this apartment?" he asked, his voice flat and professional.
Yeah,
I am. "What's this about?" I asked, confused and more than a little worried. "I'm Detective Mason," he said, his expression serious. "I need to speak with you regarding a matter of some urgency. It's about your ex." My stomach dropped. This wasn't happening. I turned back to the living room, where my ex was now standing, watching the scene unfold. "Is this about him?" I asked, my voice wavering. The detective nodded, his eyes moving from me to my ex. "Yes, it is."
Can we come inside?
I stepped aside, and the detective entered the apartment, followed by another officer who looked just as serious. My ex didn't make a move. He simply stood there, arms crossed, watching the entire exchange unfold. I had no idea what was going on, but I had an overwhelming sense that this wasn't just some random visit. "What's this about?" I asked again, this time my voice more firm, though I was starting to feel more than a little unnerved. "Your ex," the detective said, "has been involved in an ongoing investigation. We believe he has been engaged in illegal activity, and we need to ask him a few questions." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind raced, trying to process what was happening. My ex? Involved in something illegal? I couldn't wrap my head around it. The The detective turned to my ex, his gaze unflinching. We know you've been living here for a while. We need you to come down to the station with us for questioning. For a moment, there was silence in the room. My ex didn't budge. Then, finally, he spoke. You're not taking me anywhere, he said, his voice eerily calm. I'm not going anywhere with you. The tension in the room was thick. I was frozen, unsure of what to do. I had no idea how deep this went, but I knew one thing for sure. My life had just taken a turn I wasn't prepared for. I wasn't just fighting for my apartment anymore. I was fighting to survive whatever mess he had dragged me into. The air in the room had become thick with tension. My ex hadn't moved, his eyes locked on the detective, and his face was completely unreadable. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea what to do, no idea where this would go. I had expected some kind of confrontation, but not like this. Not with the police showing up at my door, demanding answers. The detective's calm demeanor only made the situation more unnerving. I said, "You're coming with us," Detective Mason repeated, his voice low but firm, as he stepped closer to my ex. "I'm not going anywhere," my ex said, his voice ice-cold, his arms still crossed. He was standing his ground, but the way he spoke, without fear, told me that he was hiding something. Something serious. The detective didn't flinch. He just kept his eyes locked on him. "You don't have a choice. You're not leaving this apartment until we get the answers we need." The silence in the room stretched for a few seconds, and in that moment, I didn't know which direction things were headed. My ex could have easily left at any time. He could have walked away from me, from the apartment, but instead, he stood there, waiting for something. And I wasn't sure what that something was. It was clear now that he wasn't just a man avoiding rent. He was avoiding something much bigger, something that involved far more than me. I couldn't help but wonder what else he had been hiding while he had been living under my roof. "You need to come with us now," the second officer said, his voice impatient. "We're not playing games." But even then, my ex stayed put, a defiant look on his face. He didn't seem rattled, didn't seem to care that he was surrounded by two officers. "I'm not going anywhere. You can't make me." I watched the back and forth unfold, my mind racing. I didn't know what the right thing to do was. I wanted to help. I wanted to understand what was going on. But I couldn't stay caught in the middle of something I didn't even understand. I turned to the detective, trying to get a grasp on the situation. "What's happening? What's this about?" I asked, my voice shaking. I had no idea how I had managed to stay composed long enough to ask, but it was the only thing I could think to say. The detective shifted his gaze to me, and there was something in his eyes, something I couldn't place, but it was heavy, like he was trying to decide how much to tell me. "Your ex," he began slowly, his tone serious, "is involved in a larger investigation. We believe he's been operating under a false identity, using your apartment as a cover for illegal activities. We've been tracking him for months." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I stood there, staring at the detective in disbelief. "Wait, what?" I said, unable to fully process what I was hearing. "You're telling me he's been using my apartment for illegal activities? Are you serious?" The detective nodded, his expression never changing. "We've been watching him, and we have evidence linking him to several crimes. We were trying to get him to cooperate, but now that you're involved, things have changed. You're in this whether you like it or not. The best thing you can do is stay out of it for your own safety." I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. Everything had been so simple before, annoying but simple. But now I had a hard time even looking at him. The man I had once trusted, the one I had loved, had been living in my apartment for months, hiding from the law, hiding from me. And I had no idea. I didn't even know who he really was anymore. He looked at me then, his gaze cold, and for a moment, our eyes locked. He had no apology in his eyes, no regret. He wasn't even sorry for any of it. He had used me as a shield, and now he was throwing me aside like an inconvenience. I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't going to leave without a fight. But what could he do now? The police were here. His lies had caught up with him. "I don't need to tell you anything," he said finally, his voice low, but with an edge of finality. "I'm not going anywhere. Not until I'm ready." The detective didn't back down. You don't get a choice anymore. You're under arrest. You've been avoiding us for months, and now we're not letting you slip away. You're coming with us." My ex glared at the officer, his expression filled with hatred. But he didn't make a move. He didn't try to run, didn't try to fight. I don't know if it was because he knew he had been cornered, or if he simply didn't care anymore. All I knew was that the person standing in front of me wasn't the man I had once known. He was a stranger, and the mask he had been wearing was finally cracking. I took a step back, almost instinctively. I couldn't stay here. I didn't want to watch what was about to happen. I didn't want to witness his downfall. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't just leave.
Not now.
I couldn't let him drag me into his mess any longer. The officer made a move toward him, and my ex didn't resist. There was no fight left in him. The detective cuffed him swiftly, and I watched, unable to look away. It felt like I was in a dream, like none of this was really happening. This wasn't my life.
This couldn't be. But it was.
When the officer turned to me, I felt a lump form in my throat. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle, like he was asking about a scratch on my arm. But there was nothing gentle about this. I nodded, unsure of what to say. I didn't feel okay. I didn't know how to feel. I don't know, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. I thought I knew him. I thought I knew everything. The detective's face softened for a moment, just a moment, before he nodded. "I understand. This situation is not easy, and you have every right to feel betrayed. But you need to stay clear of him. He's going to face some serious charges, and you don't want to get dragged into it." They led my ex out the door, and I stood there in silence, my mind racing, trying to make sense of everything. I had wanted him gone. I had wanted my apartment back. But I never imagined that it would end like this. I had hoped it would just be a clean break, that I could walk away from him and never look back. But life had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. As I stood there, the apartment finally feeling like it was mine again, I realized something. I had gotten back control, but it had come at a cost. I couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the mistakes I had made. But I could move forward. I could rebuild. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me ever again.